So laydowns, docks, bluffs, any cover that you want to try to penetrate, those fish are in that, you know, they're up under that stump or next to the stump. I'm going to throw that flipping jig in or on that stump. I'm going to throw it under that dock. I'm going to throw it into that laydown. I'm going to take my flipping jig and I'm going to flip it into the cover, and I'm going to work it real slow, and then when those fish bite it, I'm going to pull them out of the cover. So flipping jig, you're thinking penetrate, flip into the cover, get the bite, and then you have the heavier equipment, then you can pull them and get them out. Standing timber, you know, anything like that where you get a lot of cover, you're going to penetrate that cover, get into the cover. That's what you want. That's when you want that flipping jig. And so why am I going to take a flipping jig and not, let's say, a flipping tube or some other soft plastic bait that I can also flip into that same piece of cover? Well, the size and bulk of a jig, whether it's a flip out big full size jig or like a little mini flip jig, a little bit smaller, it's the profile, it's the bulk of that bait in all those skirt strands. That bulk, a lot of times, in my opinion, that's what gets them to react and to bite it. That's their trigger, is that bulk of the jig. When they're on that jig, in that bulk, you really hardly can't beat fishing the jig. I mean, flipping that jig in there when they want that bulk, that's a huge deal. And when you flip that jig in there, people that are familiar with flipping and pitching, you'll know a lot of the strikes come as that bait's going into the cover. As that bait's falling in there, that's when you're going to get a lot of your strikes. If you don't get bit on that initial fall, and you have it in the cover, don't just pull it out, or don't hop it 2 or 3 times and then pull it out. Don't do that. Let the skirt work for you. Let that skirt flare. That's really the hidden gem of the jig, the flipping jig, is that skirt. And that's why it excels over top of just a straight soft plastic, because all these little thin strands, they breathe and they do all kind of stuff. So when you flip that flipping jig in there, you just kind of shake it and just barely move it. You want that skirt to flare and then fall down, flare and then fall down. A lot of times that action is what triggers those fish to bite it. I had a friend of mine, a very good jig fisherman. I'm not going to give up your name because then people will know who you are. But he told me, he said, when you flip that jig into the cover, in your mind, you want to think like you're fishing for fish on a bed, like visually fishing for fish on a bed. So you flip that jig in there, you're picturing fish looking at that jig, and you're just trying to twitch it and move it to try to trigger them to bite it, because you think that fish are looking dead at it. So that's kind of one little tip that can probably help you with jig fishing. Once you get it into that cover, don't rush to put it out. Just kind of shake it. Let that skirt work for you. Let that skirt flare. That's a big deal. And really, there's with the flipping jigs, there's 2 types of trailers. One is like the mini D-chunk, the action, and I love this because it has a lot of kicking action as it's going down. I think there's times when that kicking action is huge. That's key. That kicking action can be the trigger as well. But then there's times when you want that jig to fall faster, and you don't want that extra resistance of that action. You want that bait to just fall straight. Probably the number one is the Zoom Big Salty Chunk. I don't care what anybody says that they have on the back of their jig. Most of the dudes on tour, when they want the no action trailer, they're fishing a big salty chunk. That's just what they're fishing. It's just tried and true. They're inexpensive. You can get a bunch of different colors. You can also put like a big D-bomb on the back as well. That's going to create a little more resistance and slow the fall a little bit more, but it still gives you that no action trailer. So either they want the action trailer or the no actions. It's kind of 2 different categories. We've talked in a bunch of other seminars I've done, talked about one or the other, giving a couple options. When you're flipping a jig, that's one of the options. So when you want to penetrate that cover, you are thinking flipping jig.
And the information Bass University provides isn't your basic run-of-the-mill fishing video. This is specific information from A to Z to help you learn, get to the water, and become a better angler quickly.